The load capacity of a linear ball bushing bearing is affected by its orientation with respect to the applied load. For maximum capacity, the linear bearing is oriented so the load is distributed between load-bearing tracks. By graphing the load capacity versus orientation as a factor of the maximum capacity on a polar graph, the relationship of load versus orientation can be seen. These graphs can be found for every linear bearing on the Thomson website under the Performance tab or in the product catalog. The graph shown here is for an SSU-16 linear bearing. Notice that when the load is applied so it is distributed evenly over multiple tracks, the capacity is the highest, and when applied directly over the bearing track, it is at the lowest. When the load is distributed evenly over multiple tracks, we achieve maximum capacity. When the load is directly over one set of bearing tracks, we must derate the load capacity. In this case, the derating or load correction factor would be 0.75 or 75% of its maximum load. Closed linear bearings can be clocked at different angles inside their housings. The load capacity can be optimized by orienting the linear bearing to distribute the load over multiple bearing paths. If the optimal orientation to the load cannot be guaranteed, derate the linear bearing. When using open linear bearings, there is another important situation to consider. Graphing the load correction factor versus load orientation for an open bearing shows that forces that would press the bearing down onto the rail are the same as the closed bearing. But the capacity for loads pulling opposite of the slot or trying to pull the bearing off the rail is greatly reduced. In the case of the SSU-16 OPN linear bearing, it can resist a pull-off load of about 25% of its maximum load. Normally, it is not practical to attempt to position open-type linear bearings for maximum capacity because of shaft supports, which restrict rotation. But it is important to know how applying a load in different directions affects the load rating and design accordingly. If you have further questions about linear bearing orientation affecting load capacity, contact our experienced customer support team.